Bienvenidos, señoras y señores, to El Espejo Negro, or the Black Mirror episode. In this time together, we're going to talk about the influence of technology on culture and social behavior in the United States of America, my country. Unlike other parts in the world, all one needs to do is unlock their mobile device and voila, they're connected to the matrix. The first cell phone was invented on the 3rd of April, 1973, by a Motorola engineer named Martin Cooper. The prototype was 2 pounds or 1 kilo, and after 10 hours of charge time, you can then talk for 10 minutes. So back then it was a pretty big deal to have a cell phone. Now 9 out of 10 Americans own one. The tech companies that develop apps work towards this objective. How can we design the interface so that people not only check daily, but consistently? In order to answer this riddle, they've recruited the help of neuroscientists. Why? Well, neuroscientists have esoteric knowledge about the addictive facets of the brain and how to cue triggers that will create dependent behaviors. It's kind of like Pavlov's theory of conditioning, except for instead of a dinner bell, it's a... The word addiction is derived from a Latin term for enslaved by or bound to. And as some of you already know, when engaged in certain activities, the brain releases dopamine. This word came up a lot during my research, and I decided to look into it further and gain a better understanding of it. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it's associated with the brain's reward and pleasure centers. It assists the body in regulating movement and motor functions, hence a deficiency in it can sometimes lead to Parkinson's. And low levels can actually make the brain more prone to addiction. One of its receptors is associated with motivation or seeking out certain sensations in a compulsive manner. Here's the menacing side of dopamine. Whether it's a piece of chocolate, a line of cocaine, receiving a text message, a hit of nicotine, getting more likes, a shot of heroin, email alert, all of these activities equally cause a secretion of dopamine in the brain. So the hippocampus then correlates this activity with it being pleasurable and worthy of seeking out again and again. A conditioned response to that stimuli is born and a habit is formed. It matters not if the activity is healthy or harmful. The brain does not differentiate. It could be drugs, okay? Alcohol, gambling, shopping, and or the plethora of phone notifications. And I also discovered that teens are a lot more sensitive to dopamine than adults are. Our sympathetic system, that fight or flight response, is being triggered all the time, indirectly by these notifications, and it's having both a physiological as well as a psychological effect. It has been estimated that people in the US check their phones 50, 80, upwards to 150 times a day, varying between age groups. Parents, do you remember the freedom that we had as kids to leave our house and just be out in the world? When I was a youngin', my friends would have to call abuela's house or grandma's house to get a hold of me. Ay, pero como joden por teléfono, mi madre, ay no morir. Oigo.
Hello, is Elizabeth home?
Who is speaking, please?
Hi, this is Heather. Heather.
Okay. I tell her you call. Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
I'd be out and about, riding my bicycle around the neighborhood, playing hide and go seek, digging for buried treasure in the backyard. And some children don't know what that creative and unstructured autonomy of play feels like without a cell phone. And that is truly disheartening to me. Children are now equally as obligated to be connected as we are. And the average age for them to have a cell phone in the States is 10. Most of you by now have seen the scenario. Entire families and groups of friends sitting physically together and yet virtually apart. Some people sleep right next to their phones, on. They'll look at it the moment they wake up, before formulating an original thought, or simply thinking, Lord, oh Lord, I live to see another day. Hallelujah. It has been estimated by the National Safety Council that a whopping 78% of distracted drivers on the road are due to texting. And it accounts for 1 out of every 4 car accidents in the US. A vehicle is a form of transportation, yes, but it can also potentially be a weapon. Some of you may already know from experience or close calls that time simply does not elapse in the same way when you're driving and looking down at your phone. This one day I'm heading south on the 5 and I receive a text notification. By the time that I sent the response and looked up, to my amazement, I'm next in line at a Starbucks drive-thru.
I'm kidding. It's a joke. I'm kidding.
Now, there may not be a monetary cost to joining a social media platform, but it is far from free. Your payment is basically allowing yourself to be monitored and having these sophisticated algorithms calculate the probability of your behavior. It is not a coincidence that the Facebook newsfeed is a never-ending, scrolling pit of mostly trivial information with the occasional pearl of wisdom. This is an intentional part of the design to keep you there for as long as you allow yourself to be. Why? Well, the longer that you stay in these apps, the more information that's gathered about your browsing patterns, and that will help tailor the advertisements that you're exposed to. And you're probably thinking, well, yeah, that's not a big deal. But you know what? I would say it is, because this is part of the behavioral conditioning. The amount spent on advertisements has nearly doubled in the last 2 years to 31 billion. Not pesos, dollars. That is B as in Bravo, not M as in Mary. And I find it hard to believe that there is innocence or even neutrality behind an intention with that many zeros. Some of you guys may recall the not too distant days in which cell carriers would charge based on actual talk time. You remember there were peak hours and then it became free on the weekends. You could talk to your heart's content, and at the end of each month, there would be a variable surprise in the mail. You could be paying $80, $120, $260. How much more efficient would we be in conversation if we were still being charged by the minute? How less frivolous would we be with our internet browsing if we paid by the hour? Unlimited text and talk is the virtual equivalency of opening up Pandora's box. It was confirmed by Sprint that a 14-year-old girl sent and received 35,463 text messages in a month. And not on one occasion, on two. That's almost 1,200 a day. Simon Sinek, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, he made a great point during an interview. In the States, we have age limits for potentially addictive activities, right? So you have to be 18 to buy cigarettes and smoke. You have to be 21 to buy alcohol and drink. Well, these are the age requirements for social networks. Users now have to be 16 to use WhatsApp. And almost all other social networks require users to be 13 years of age. This includes Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, and Skype. 13! This age requirement is much lower for something that is equally as addictive as drugs. But in reality, any age can open a social networking account by simply answering yes when asked if they meet the age requirements. Even if they have to do some basic math on the date of birth, they could do it. Same thing with pornography sites, so I've been told. The average age that a child will see their first pornography video is 11. In my opinion, children do not yet have the emotional maturity to understand the consequences of the use of technology and social media. I mean, let's be honest, adults barely do. Think of the irresponsible behavior and your infantile ways of thinking when you were younger. Let me be very clear. Neither texting nor social media is bad in and of itself. The danger comes from the prioritization and the disproportionate use of it. Alcohol in moderation, socially, it's not a bad thing. However, excessive consumption makes it toxic. Or when you're hangry, food gives you tremendous pleasure when you start eating it, but if you continue to eat, it'll make you sick. Same thing applies to technology. My hypothesis, part of the reason for this imbalance is the absence of a cap. So whether you talk and text 24/7 for that whole month straight, or you don't use a phone at all, the payment is exactly the same. It's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you're going to have that 11th egg roll, not because you're hungry, just because you want to feel like you got your money's worth. Snapchat, one of the most popular applications for adolescents, has a function called streaks. Now, a streak is the consecutive number of days in which a person communicates with another person. I consider this feature to be a form of psychological preying on our youth. Is this not so? To have them strive to increase this number more and more each day? This frivolous number that literally means nothing, nada, except for the value placed on it in the child's mind. It adds absolutely no benefit to their life and is causing unnecessary anxiety. 20-year studies are now being conducted on teens to determine the long-term effects that this is having on their developing nervous systems. The reserve of dopamine in the brain is finite, and once it's been depleted, depression sets in. Ironically, though, two of the most influential people in tech, Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, and Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, may he rest in peace, they would limit the amount of time that their children spent with technology. The very technology that they created. Clearly, they were privy to the potential consequence from the very beginning. These medias have the potential to do good in the world, and yes, they've done plenty good. Reunited lost friends and family, helped communities rebuild. I mean, the internet houses a wealth of knowledge, information to encourage and to elevate the mind, the ability to advocate and collaborate on innovations. It's a brilliant side of its use, to learn, to satisfy curiosity, avenues to reach higher thinking. But the subjective question becomes, and this is a rhetorical question, do the pros outnumber the cons? They say that technology is neutral. Bullshit! Oh, excuse me. Now, they say the technology is neutral. If so, then why do you need brain scientists, son? Why are there reward simulations when using technology that is literally changing both the structure and functionality of the human brain? Like the root of most things, and it comes down to profit. For the love of money, people will steal from their brothers. Don't let money change you. Sorry, I had a New Jack City moment. These companies are all about the Benjamins. What? They're not taking into consideration what impact this is having on society when they develop these things. It's all about profit. It is simply another marketing scheme to create more imaginary needs in the minds of consumers. A mobile is a tool, an instrument, and it should not have the power to seduce so much attention from its owner. It has been said that more exploration time on Facebook increases depression. That could possibly be due to the comparison factor. We see all the happy families, couples, holiday photos, but we forget that it is only half the truth. People only show highlights of their life, but we take it as though it were the complete image, and it's not. One day, a coworker and I went out for drinks after work, and he confided in me that he and his wife had not been intimate for about 6 months. A week later, I see a photo on Facebook with the whole family, white collar shirts, matching blue jeans. What would have been more honest, perhaps, is a photo of himself in a pair of boxer shorts with an erection asking, "Can you help a brother out?" If the civil rights movement, the feminist movement, massive revolutions have been orchestrated without cell phones, then our insistence that we need it for daily life is simply not true. It is a psychological vice and a false sense of obligation to be available all the time. The dopamine release compounds this feeling and keeps us in this endless cycle. People who lose or break their cell phone actually get to feel a temporary relief of digital detox. Is it any wonder that there are group retreats that cost more than $500, which force participants to surrender their phone while they channel their inner child, running around in the woods, burning bushes like they're in Zelda? The fact that we're paying to be forced offline is evidence that we are unable to govern ourselves.
No, Elizabeth, you're wrong.
Am
It's
I?
a choice. You just have to exercise your will. I can stop whenever I want to.
Yeah, listen here, Buttercup.
Buttercup.
Not everyone can do that. Our brains are being chemically manipulated. It's not your fault. It's not a matter of just will. Nobody started using a cell phone with the intention of becoming addicted, but many of us got caught up in the hype. Our vulnerabilities as humans, being susceptible to patterns and habits, is being exploited. And the result is this behavior. It is not a choice for some of us. It is a full-blown addiction. It's like a domino effect. Monkey see, monkey do. You see a person pull out their phone and it triggers you.
Ooh, Instagram. Ooh, bananas. Snapchat.
This behavior is unraveling the very tapestry of natural and organic human interaction. That bears repeating. This behavior is unraveling the very tapestry of natural and organic human interaction. I returned to the States after a few months of living abroad in a third world country where internet is not ubiquitous. And upon my return, I felt culture shocked by my own culture. Now, when I was away, I connected maybe 2 or 3 times a week on average. You had to procure a prepaid card, and that was around $1 or $2 for an hour. You had to walk to a hotspot, and if there was electricity and a signal, then you were able to get on. And so it was such a big ordeal that most of the time I was like, I don't really need to connect. Without internet access, I started looking at my phone as more of a plastic carcass that holds games and photos. Also, mobiles were on a prepaid system, 50 cents a minute. So phone conversations were kept to a necessary exchange of information. We are trading physical experiences for a world that has neither sun nor ground. It is merely composed of 8-bit sequences of zeros and ones. I caca you not. That's exactly what it is. I am not trying to make the use of technology taboo, nor am I technophobic. I use technology every day, and I derive a lot of knowledge from it. Making it taboo would be the opposite extreme. What I'm asking is, before we unlock our phones, whether it be biometric fingerprint or a code, can we ask ourselves, am I opening my phone to use it as a tool or just feeding the addiction further? Even if it's the latter, that's okay. Own it and become aware of it. In our pursuit to distract ourselves from the silence, the very silence that allows us to hear our own inner wisdom, it's given rise to an explosion of social networks. Facebook came out in 2004, YouTube followed suit in 2005, Twitter 2006, Instagram 2010, then Snapchat 2011. Are we really going to let a handful of hipsters sitting in some garage office space, sipping on drip coffee, programming algorithms intended to suck the dopamine right out of your prefrontal cortex? Are we really going to let these guys dictate the way that we behave on a daily basis? These companies are dopamine vampires, and not cool ones like in The Lost Boys. There are foreseeable implications for children, and I would say they're paying even a higher price than we are as adults. Students are having to divide their attention between cell phone use and their studies on an almost daily basis. And for some of them, this is decreasing their academic performance, which in turn increases their anxiety. Any immature commentary that they've ever posted will be digitally timestamped and is fair play for future scrutiny. These posts never age out or expire in the eyes of society. And there is a tremendous unfairness in that. Would you want your child held accountable in 10, 15, 20 years from now for something that they posted in present day? I would say start looking at the cell phone in your kid's hand as though it was a bottle of grape-flavored Mad Dog 2020. Seriously, it's comparable to that. The same way that alcoholics dive into a bottle to cope with stress, kids are retreating into their cell phones for the same reason. The tragic irony of having all of these different virtual avenues through which to connect, the general consensus is a greater feeling of disconnect than ever before. We basically constructed this world. Children were just born into it. Thus, it is truly our responsibility to illustrate the pitfalls, mentor kids, but we must first master responsible use of it ourselves. Because do as I say and not as I do, that ain't gonna cut it. They are getting cues of what a tech life balance looks like from the adults around them. And generally speaking, to be frank, we have failed them. Studies are now showing delays in child development, brain tissue being morphed from radiation, burgeoning rates of depression, violent acts, social impediments, cyberbullying. I mean, the list goes on and on like Erykah Badu. Can we admit to each other and ourselves that we have been subtly and imperceptibly duped? And it happened right before our very eyes. Intended pun. Nostradamus didn't mention this in any of his quatrains, so he didn't even see this coming. As we registered for our free and always will be accounts, happy to have this medium to connect with friends without having a complete and fair understanding of how this personal data would be used and how it would affect our lives. Can we please, por favor, stop pretending that it is normal to see people walking around looking like a bipolar praying mantis with OCD and a cocaine problem? No es normal. It's not cute. It's not normal. People are using public toilets, getting dressed in locker rooms, doing cardio, ordering coffee, picking up prescription drugs, all while simultaneously talking on their cell phones. Basically saying, F you to the person in their immediate environment who is actually trying to serve them. So here are some suggestions to create technology boundaries. Give it a crack, see how you feel. Spend time with your kids, your nieces, nephews, neighbors' kids, without the mobile on your person. They deserve your undivided attention, and you deserve to have your attention be undivided. Procure an MP3 player or an iPod for music, especially for my Gymsharks, or even an old cell phone works, something that's not connected, right? It is beyond belief how many people I see very much distracted on their cell phones when they're at the gym trying to work out because they use it for music. And when they go to change a song, they see that little icon. They check it, boom. Oh, well, now I have to check my email. Oh, boom, bam. Oh, look, a notification. And now you're in a rabbit hole. This one time, there's one guy who was just really immersed, and I tapped him on the shoulder. I gave him a moment to take out his earbud, and I'm like, hey, do you think society is distracted by cell phones? And he looked at me with his big blue eyes, and he's like, oh, totally, yeah. I live in California, so. By not having the cell phone actually on your body, you're also reducing electromagnetic radiation. And you know what? If you work out on a regular basis, it does add up. You can also simply put it in airplane mode for the duration of the workout. For my peeps who want to get real bougie, ha 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 ha, use a compact disc or a tape player and play your music. And please send me a photo of that. Go grocery shopping with a paper list. Leave your phone in the car, well hidden. I will forewarn you, this might cause some level of frustration, but take a deep breath and remind yourself that you have lived most of your life without a cell phone. The disquietude that you are experiencing and increasing cortisol levels are actually withdrawal symptoms. Instead of, oh, it's so bad, I don't have my phone, I feel anxious, I obviously need it, approach it with curiosity instead of attachment. Reframe that. Look how my mind is going berserk because I don't have it. Take a 30-minute walk without your cell phone. You can do it! No cell phone whilst sitting on the porcelain throne. And instead, contemplate how the tacos that you ate earlier were somehow converted into this steaming pile of feces that you see below you now. It is truly magical. Airplane mode for sleep, unless you have a child, spouse, or elderly person who is remote. Do not disturb while driving. Silent, not vibrate, especially on tasks that require your concentration. And allow yourself to get into flow. Use parental control apps as a tool to see your child's activity. This is especially true with single parent home. You should both have an idea of how your child is spending their time online. Uninstall Facebook. Check social media from a computer instead, at a designated time and for a limited amount of time. This is something new that I started doing. Delay checking your phone after hearing a notification. We're talking 20, 30 seconds, right? But doing something different. Don't just react. Impromptu Shabbat. Take an evening at the house with your family or friends without electronic. Bananagram words, Rummikub, chess, Pictionary. Actually make people put all their cell phones in one centralized place to avoid temptation. Designate the dinner table as a cell phone free zone. Go and visit with the ocean, lake, or park without electronics. Bring a paperback book or journal instead. While you're standing in line waiting for something, or sitting in the doctor's office, or at a red light, maybe you're out to dinner with a friend and they leave the table to use the restroom. Resist with every cell, again, intended pun, in your body to check the phone. Cut the psychological umbilical cord and leave the phone in one spot in the house instead of carrying it from room to room like it's an infant. Unless, of course, you have a special circumstance like you're on call or whatever it is. Go zombie watching. See what other OCD praying mantises look like in wild environments like airports and malls, but without judgment. Having your addiction reflected back to you by another is a powerful perspective. Turn off all notifications except for when it's an actual Homo sapien trying to reach you, either through a text, call, or email. Now, in the spirit of Buddhist philosophy, you needn't take my word for it. Implement any combination of the above strategies for at least 2 or 3 weeks and feel the difference as you find freedom in the present moment and create a healthier relationship with technology. Now, to be forthright, I am by no stretch of the imagination technologically enlightened. I too am fighting this internal war right alongside with you. Most of us dramatically underestimate the amount of time that we use our phone because it's consistent throughout the day and evening. Our waking hours are punctuated by it. So the first step would be to create a baseline of your current usage and then work towards reducing it. Whether it's 25%, 50%, it's at your discretion. There are apps, of course, to help you track this, but in this case, it is a tool to help establish a baseline from which to reduce screen time. That's the goal. The thing about us humans is that we don't really heed warnings, right? We have disease lung photos on cigarette packages, and yet that doesn't deter us from smoking. So I would say make it into a competition. It's been proven that we hold ourselves more accountable in the judgment of others. Do it as a family or with a friend, coworkers, or write a check to an organization that you despise. Give it to a trusted friend and instruct them. If you do not meet your goal, they have permission to mail it out. Now, it doesn't have to be an amount that's going to cause an overdraft, right? But definitely something that you're going to feel. Someone I knew did this with a sugar-free diet, and it worked quite well for her. This magnificent planet gives us a reason every day to be in awe of her. And yet, we're somehow more mesmerized by crushing imaginary candy. Historically, we have navigated to physical addresses before Google Maps, lifted the hood of the car to ask for roadside assistance, made babies without Bumble, kept in contact with the most valued people in life, educated ourselves through printed material, kept appointments without Outlook, all before the onset of the digital age. Again, please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I am not implying that we should forsake technology altogether, shave our heads, and recite mantras all day. Hear me now, rude boy, booyakasha. Rather, the challenge that I'm posing is, now that we have this disclosure from these tech companies of how and why they're designing these apps, can we take that truth to reclaim some of our mental energy and invest it in more conscientious and productive ways?
I would totally work out if the day had 34 hours in it. I mean, I just don't have time.
Reclaiming the sanctity of our personal and family time by reducing the screen time would be a great start. However, we must first acknowledge the addiction, because we cannot address something unless we believe that it exists. Then we must actively go against the conditioning every day to be that individual who does not need to consistently fill the space in their heads. With the screen of the cell phone off, look at your reflection in that black mirror and ask, do I want to continue blindly succumbing to the social norm like a moth seduced by illuminated screens, making the groves of the addiction deeper? Or do I wish to return to the innate childlike awe of the physical world and engage in more experiences that indulge all my available senses instead of just two? Our individual composure in society does matter, and each of us has within us the power to influence the status quo. This concludes episode El Espejo Negro, or the Black Mirror. I feel very thankful for having spent this time together and hope that what you heard today proves to be helpful. Until next time, take care. Cuídate. Ciao.